Hi there, it's me, Ben. I would like to make a video explaining the menu system on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre pinball machine that I programmed, because I don't think we've documented this, but if I show it to you, hopefully that will help you out. Yeah, so in the menu, well, obviously you push the green button inside the coin door. I'll be able to do it here with the keyboard. You can actually plug a USB keyboard into the computer in the back of the unit, and you can use the enter key to go into the menu, the escape key to go back, and you can push left or right or up and down arrow keys to navigate the menu. So I'm going to push enter on the keyboard. That's the same as pushing the green button. On the bottom of the screen, I have a context menu. So you see that what the red button does, the green button does, and what the two black category or select buttons do. When you're in attract mode or during the game, the two black buttons will change the volume of the game. And you can also go into the menu at any time during the game and change things, and you can exit out and the game will continue. So if you want to take the glass off and hold the ball, you can do that, or you can do it in a skill shot. Yeah, and the changes will take effect immediately, although there are some situations where you might cause the game state to get messed up. So, all right, so let's just go through these one by one. You can see it says errors logged. That means there was kind of a credit dot error. Okay, so switch test. I'm going to hit enter, the green button. I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory. It just tells you what switches are being pressed. It'll show you both states. So it'll show you the rising edge, and then when you release the button, it'll show you the falling edge. And the flipper buttons on this game are dual staged. So when you push them in a little bit, you'll do the first one, and when you push it in all the way, you'll see the second one. So the upper flippers are controlled by the second stage of the two main flipper buttons. So if I release this slowly, you'll see upper right flipper button will go to off, and then the other one will go to off as well. There's a stuck switch test. This is mostly used for production when they're building it, but this will show you what switches are on. So the trough is active, obviously, the orbit diverter is down, and the Leatherface toy is home. And if you push the enter key here, you will change. There's an exclusion list. So if you only want to look at optos, or if you don't want to look at the trough, you can cycle through those here. Light test. Okay, this is, well, obviously the lights. So again, you go through the menus left and right, up and down. So if we go all inserts on, we can hit red, we tap it, green, blue, white, and off. Then you can turn them all off just by tapping this. Then you can also test each light one at a time. So I can hit this here, and if I go left to right, it'll change which light is lit. And if I tap the enter key, it'll change what color that light is lit to. So you can just go through the whole list individually if you want. GI, there's only one chain of GI in this game. It's just a bunch of red lights. So you can turn that on and off here. Same thing. Keep going. Same thing with the apron. You can turn it on, and then you can turn it off. And then the RGB kit, that refers to the RGB lights for the topper, the speakers, and the button on the front of the unit. Same thing. You can just tap the button here and cause that to change. Oh, gameplay settings. Okay, this is the big one. Balls per game, that's obvious. Warnings before tilt. Tilt cooldown, that's if the tilt bob hits the metal, it will wait this amount of time before it considers another hit to be valid. So you can change this to whatever you want. It's in half seconds. Or you can be really brutal and only make it 0 seconds. Standard ball save time, this is the ball save for when you just launch the ball, oh, it's ball 1. This timer starts as soon as the ball leaves the shooter lane, so after you launch it. And there's a variable launch in this game, so you hold the launch button in, then you'll see the needle move, and then you want to release the button. That's when the ball actually launch. Multi-ball save time, obviously this is during multi-balls. So the difference between the standard save and the multi-ball save is the multi-ball save is not canceled when a ball drains. So basically this was like 15 seconds of unlimited drains. This might be a little bit high, but you can adjust it to whatever you want. Eject bounce ball save time. This is kind of considered like a risky ball. Like if the ball shoots out of a scoop, if the ball hits the door, if it hits the Captive ball, and if it comes out of the freezer lock, it will start this duration of a temporary ball save. And if you're in standard ball save, it will basically, like, let's say you have 10 seconds left on your standard ball save. If this amount of time, 3 seconds, is less than the current ball save, then it won't affect the current ball save. However, if 3 seconds is greater than the current ball save, it will add this time to it. And that also works with the multi-ball. This is the amount of time before a ball search starts. It'll do 3 phases of increasing aggression, and then if it can't find the ball after the 3rd phase, it will launch a chase ball. And then it will try to recover the ball as well. If the ball is not recovered at the end of the game, it will save a flag, and the game will continue to be on the lookout for the loose ball in future games. And that setting is persistent, even if you turn the game off. Ball launch hold. Okay, so as I mentioned, you hold the launch button to have the power go up and down like a Madden kick, like a video game football kick. So 5 seconds is the maximum amount of time before it'll just automatically launch the ball. Allow start with 1 ball missing, pretty obvious. That also pertains to the chase ball. So if you don't have this, the game won't start without all 7 balls in. Door how long hold. So for modes where it grabs the ball at the door, this is how long it'll hold the ball for. The idea here is you want to make sure the ball completely stops moving before you attempt a sling through the door. So 3 seconds is what they recommend. I think that's what Eric did on Looney Tunes. Door magnet catch power. This is the percentage of power for when you're trying to catch the ball on that magnet. And it's different than the knock power, because when you're in a mode where you want to knock that ball loose, there's a lower power setting for that, which is that's in a different menu. Door sling adjust. This one's important. So this is the number of milliseconds. So it releases the ball. It waits 220 milliseconds or whatever you put in, and then it does a short pulse to move the ball again and throw it up to the door. So this is what you can adjust if you want to dial that in. And actually, if you hit enter here and then put the ball on the magnet, it will do a test cycle for you, so you can test that outside of the game itself. Door magnet. This is the same setting that's in the coil settings as well. It's just duplicated here. So this is the pulse width for when it re-grabs the ball and tries to throw it through the door. So apron brightness. So the trick here is the apron is, even if I set this to 100%, that's actually not the total brightness of the apron. Like, the aprons can go brighter than that. So what I do is I actually have, when there's apron effects, the apron will actually go higher than this value. So this is actually 100% here actually means 50%. And then when you're in the game, it'll jump past this setting, which is your default lighting setting. It'll go brighter than this and then fade back down. So this is kind of what you want for your general illumination. Like, when the apron's on, this is the level that you want, or what you choose as a player. This is if someone doesn't enter their name in the high score quickly enough. This is when the ball is sitting on the shooter lane. If you have this game on route, you'll probably want this to have a value greater than never. So if the player doesn't do anything, if they don't hold the launch button or anything, this is how long until the ball is just auto-launched. This one is fairly pedantic. Yeah, so when you get to like phase 3 of the cook, you can hit the spinner to cook the meat, and there's like a needle. You'll see a ticket, an order, piece of paper in the right hand corner of the screen. It'll say, medium well, right? And then you hit the spinner until the needle gets the temperature that it needs to be to serve the meat, and then you shoot the door to serve the meat. But this is the kind of thing you put in to keep them going crazy. So you can have it be in Kelvin, Celsius, or Fahrenheit. The temperatures are always the same. This just converts how they display on screen. That's just like hyper geek stuff. Grinder exit max time. This is the grinder. When the grinder turns on, it will either turn off when it dumps out, because there's actually 2 optos in that scoop, or it'll turn off after 8 seconds. And when the game boots, it will run the grinder for this amount of time, no matter what, to make sure there's no ball there. And also during attract mode, and also during the game, if the ball's not supposed to be in the grinder, if it gets in the grinder, it'll be kicked out automatically. Captive ball lock shot. So the hook lock is enabled by hitting the captive ball. You know, if you have this on the hardest setting, like if you don't spot any shots, it takes 5 captive ball shots to light the hook lock. So by spotting 3 or 4 of these, you make it easier to get that. And then if a player starts hook lock multi-ball, and if they complete the mode, which in that it just means they get at least one jackpot. The next time that player advances it, this actually goes down by 1. So this is the starting setting per player per game. So every time you beat that mode, it'll take 1 more shot to qualify each lock. Same thing with Pam. That's when you shoot the ball into the freezer. You can do that during any mode because it's kind of a tough shot. So this one's set to 5. So you might want to make it a little bit easier. So 3 shots into the freezer will light the Pam mode. So modes that have timers, this one will basically 10, 9, 8. So you can turn that on and off. And then you can say at what point the countdown starts, so you can have it start counting at 10 seconds. I think it goes down to 5. So this way he'd only say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Likewise, I do like an animation on the speakers, kind of like a clock, which also indicates the number of seconds left. So when it gets down to 10, blah, 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 you'll see the speaker kind of like go in a clockwise dial. So you can turn that on and off. The default is on. One thing in the settings, like when you, well, they usually clone these games, but especially like if you do a code update, go in and check your game, because if features are added, like, oh, I've added this feature in the future, the default for the feature is off. So you want to make sure that you have the new stuff on. Door sticky ball timeout. This hasn't been fully implemented yet. This is if 2 balls are stuck on the magnet when you're trying to knock the ball loose. And this is how many seconds for it to time out. That's actually not in the game yet, but it will be. Flip, hold, pauses at time. Oh yeah, so if you, this was a Hilton idea. If you're cradling a ball and you're just holding it, any timers in a mode will stop after 3 seconds of that. This is so people can't time out of modes. It kind of forces you to finish the mode. And then if you hold one of the flipper buttons to show a status for the modes, this is how many seconds until the status screen shows up. And if there's more than one status screen, this is how long each status screen will appear for. Mode score beat time on. Oh yes, okay. So when you start a mode, near the beginning of the mode, there'll be a splash piece of paper on the bottom of the screen that shows you who has the current high score for this mode, and this indicates how long that will appear on screen. Like, oh, grandpa mode, oh, the best player is, Bob, and their score is X. And then during the mode, it'll actually tell you if you've beaten that high score. And then at the end of the game, obviously you can enter your name for the high score, and then your name will appear next time. Now, if you're playing a 4-player game or a multiplayer game, let's say player 1 gets the high score on grandpa, and then player 2 goes into grandpa mode, it'll say player 1 has the high score on grandpa because the player hasn't entered their name yet. So it said, okay, well, I don't know what the player 1's name is, but player 1 has the current high score. Combo chain timer, this is kind of important. So when you light combos, which are always lit, this is the amount of time. So there's 2 things. There's the length of each combo, which is usually around 6 seconds. And then there's the amount of time before the combo timer times out, and that's indicated by the combo chain button by the windmill. So if you can get another combo going in this amount of time, then your combo timer keeps building. Can't quite remember off the top of my head, but yeah. So if you want to make the combos easier to chain, you could lower this number. This is how many modes completed lights an extra ball. The mode has to be completed, not started. And if you get enough loop combos are when you shoot the inner loop and the ball goes into the center scoop. So this is how many of those you need to hold the multiplier. It's not a very gory movie. There are a couple parts where I think it's like when Kirk gets hit at the door and you see like his body twitching close up. I think that's cut out if you set this to off. And then I think a few other things are cut out, like when the hitchhiker slices Franklin's arm because it's a close-up. But this doesn't change a whole heck of a lot. Tournament mode isn't implemented yet, but this removes randomness that tourney players hate. And earlier I talked about like the risky ball stuff, like the ball's coming out of the freezer or whatever. So turn that on. I would think by default you'd want that on, but if you feel that makes the game too easy by giving out those short ball saves, you can turn that off. Okay, track mode music. I don't think this is implemented yet, so it's okay to leave that off. This is if touching the flipper buttons causes sounds. So I don't think that's not in the game yet. It might be. We have a speech pack coming later. We have a lot more dialogue that the narrator says. That'll be in a future update. So here's the volume levels. So these are the percentages of the total volume. So let's say the game has a volume of like 1 to 20. So if the game's at volume 10, the voice level will be 100% of the volume 10 level. So basically this is how you balance stuff. So typically you probably want voice and sound effect pretty high, and then you want music and ambience to be lower. And then if you want the music to get quieter while voices play, not sound effects, just voices, you can turn this on, which is probably what you want to do. And this is the amount by which the music is reduced during speech. So 50% is the standard. Speak and switch is the leftover thing. I had the same setting in America's Most Haunted, and I said I'm going to put it in this game. So yes, if you turn this on, well here. So I'll tell you what switches are pressing now. Where that comes into play is in the switch test. See, I have this idea with America's Most Haunted because, like, if you're under the playfield testing stuff, you can't see the screen. So this is still pretty. This just tells you the number. I use the same speech from America's Most Haunted too. Why re-record it? It's obviously perfectly good speech. All right, see the border around the screen? So if you don't feel that the LCD has been mounted perfectly center, this allows you to move the camera. See that? That's why there's a grid. Or maybe you're like really tall or really short, and like the bezel is covering up part of the screen. You can use this to adjust. Also, you can suppress the credit dot with this. That's the audio and video settings. So there's coil settings and coil test. So coil settings is where you set the power, and coil test is where you test it. I originally had this menu also just do the test, but Spooky asked me to separate them. So the flippers are in percentage, so 80 is the default. The lower flippers, they have a range of 50 to 100 because obviously you don't want them to be too weak. The upper flippers have a lower range, so I believe it's 25 to 100. 50 is perfectly fine for the upper flippers. Left sling, right sling, the trough, auto launcher. So there's auto launcher, but there's also skill shot launch lowest power and highest power. So when you see the needle moving when the game turns on, that's like the power level. Again, it's like a Madden field goal. And so when the needle is low, it's a low power eject, and when the needle is high, it's a high power eject. You're trying to hit the flashing light. So this is the power for the lowest power of the needle, and this is the highest power. So ideally, you want this one to kick it out with a pretty good power, so it hits like the top of barbecue target. And this one, you want it to hit the lower barbecue target. And you can take the glass off and put the ball in the shooter lane and test this out. 7 and 13 seem to work pretty well for a range. So what the game does is it basically takes the needle's position in degrees, and then it maps it from a range of this setting to that setting, and that's what it actually spits out. Right stop post, that's the freezer post. Door magnet, this is the same setting that was in the other menu. So this is the initial magnet pulse, and this is also what it uses when it flings the ball around. So 40 milliseconds is pretty good. The catch power is, again, this is in percentage. This is how much power the magnet has when it's trying to hold the ball. Like, oh, I caught the ball and I'm going to throw it through the door. Door magnet hold power, this is like, oh, the ball is holding, the magnet's holding the ball, but the idea is the other ball can knock that ball loose. So we actually have a lower power for that. That way it's easier to knock loose. And I think ideally you probably want this one to be as low as it, well, you probably find the lowest setting that works and then go up a little bit. The left scoop in the middle, that has 2 eject powers. So if you hold the left flipper when the ball goes into that scoop, it'll do a low power eject so that the ball just kicks out a little bit and then returns on the left. If you don't hold the left flipper button when it goes in there, the default is to eject it strong so it does a clockwise movement to the right, and that's what this one is. So this is when you hold the left flipper when it goes in there, and this is when you don't hold the left flipper. But I like the idea of having that soft launch to the left because that gives you a really safe return to the left flipper. This is putting the auto drop target up and down. Reset up takes a little bit more power than you might think. So this one's, as you can see, it's a lot higher than the auto dropper. The grinder diverter doesn't really require a very big pulse. So the front scoop eject. Ideally, you want to make sure the ball goes across the flippers. So if you have this too low, you might actually cause it to drain. I actually use the knocker for more things in the game than just, extra credits or whatever. So like if you get Super Spinner, it will actually do a soft knock every other spin. And that's what this setting is. This is the regular knocker shedding. Shedding? It's like I'm Sean Connery. This is the regular knocker setting, like a loud one for extra coins and stuff. And then this is the initial shaker pulse. The shaker is usually a PWM value, but this is the initial pulse, so I would leave that low as well. Coil tests, you can't change them here. You just go in and you hit a button and they go off. If you go to the bottom, there is an option to cycle them all. So this is kind of like, this is something they usually do when they're building it, but if you want to test it as well, you can just hit this option and it will cycle all of them. This is how many times it'll go through all of them, so the default is 1. And this is the amount of time between each coil. So this would be like dun, 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 dun. Servo settings. So all the motors in this game are servos. So servos work with degrees. Some of the servos are continuous rotation. The grinder and Leatherface are continuous rotation servos. The rest of them are 180 degree servos. So this should already be set up, but if you ever want to adjust it, you can say, oh, a good place to start would be hook lock, the hook ball 1. So you click it, it'll go to the 1 position, make sure that it's good. And then this is where it pushes to the left to push the lever, which makes the balls drop out. You want to make sure you don't have this one too far. So the lower you go, the further it'll push. But you don't want to strain it. So just find the right degrees to push it open, and that's all you really need. 175 is the part where it drops through. I don't actually use that in code. That's basically just like in case the ball's in the vuck and you don't want it to go into a hook lock. That's why there's that 4th hole. Same thing with the door open. You want to make sure the door is far enough to the right when it's open that it's slightly behind that piece of metal so the ball can move in smoothly. But again, I would recommend only put it as far as it needs to go for the ball to clear. So you don't really need to have the door completely closed either for it to work fine. So now these are the continuous rotation servos. And probably in the future I should make the menu, because of course it makes sense in my head, but so if you have a servo that has a setting from 0 to 180 degrees, that's what it moves to in degrees. Continuous rotation servos work differently in that the 90 degree setting, the center of it, that's stopped. And then if you go lower than 90 degrees, it moves clockwise. And the further you move away from 90 degrees, the faster it moves. If you go above 90 degrees, it moves counterclockwise. And the higher you go above 90, the faster it moves. 90 degrees is the position at which the grinder isn't moving. So with your grinder, you want to find, it's usually probably going to be 85 to 80 for this one. And just enough that it moves, but you don't want this to be too low. Now that's the minimum move speed. And by very few, I mean I think just one mode actually uses the minimum speed. Most of the time, the system will take your minimum speed and actually make it 20 faster. So it's kind of like it's like this is the value that makes it move, but this is just the baseline. This is what the system builds off of. Same thing with Leatherface. Now he moves clockwise and counterclockwise, so you can see we've got stopped in the middle. Now stopped should normally be 90 degrees, but sometimes it might be something different, so just keep that in mind. You might have to go like 95 or 88. So we see we go lower and he moves clockwise, and if we go a little bit higher, he moves counterclockwise. So again, these are the baseline values. So when you set this up, just make sure you've got it so he's moving. See, if I go up too high, like 86, he doesn't move. But 80, he definitely moves, so that's a good safe number. This one should probably be equidistant. There we go. All right. Finally, we have the freezer closed and freezer open. That's probably pretty self-explanatory. You probably don't want it to open too far all the way because you don't want to strain the servo. So 15 to 70 is pretty conservative. And that's the servo settings. Pricing, replay. Oh, this is going to just be thrilling. All right, obviously free play, on, off. Credit type, so you can go by coins or pulses. So if you have like a bill exchanger or if you've got something else rigged up or a credit card swiper, you can basically say, oh, if I get 3 pulses, it gives me 5 credits, or if I get 2 pulses, it gives me 1 credit. So you can set that up here. That's like, it allows you to do like, 2 for 3 and stuff like that. I'm really bad at that kind of math. It's kind of like when you try to split up a tip or something. Credit for high score. So if you get on the high score board, so grand champion or first place to 5th place, this will give you credit for getting your name on the board. Match boost. Match is obviously completely rigged, just like the Keymaster game at the mall. So this number can basically make it easier to get a match. So the default is 0. Ha 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 ha. And this is what you get for the replay. So credits the default. Replay score 20 million. Man, this one. I would say at least 100 million. Because normally if you do okay in this game, a standard mode will score like 20 to 30 million points. Replay type, so you do fixed, where it never changes from 100 million, or you can do auto adjust. So if you go 5 games without someone getting a replay, it will like, okay, I'm going to throw you a bone. So, oh, no one's gotten a replay in 5 games. So what it'll do is in the next game, the replay will be reduced by 5 million or whatever you want it to be. The replay will be reduced by 5 million down to a minimum of this setting. But then if someone does get the replay, we rubber band it like NBA Jam, and the replay goes up to a maximum of this setting. But by all means, if you have more suggestions for pulses and pulses per credit, just let me know. Oh, utilities. This one, there's a lot to unpack here. So this is where you update the game. I would recommend that you insert your USB media before you turn the game on, just to make sure that it mounts. Obviously there's none mounted here, but if it was here, you'd press enter once, and then it would show you a list of files. So it's going to be a file that ends in PKG for package. And you could have if you have multiple PKG files on the thumbstick, it will let you choose which one, and the file name will have the version number on it. So yes, you hit this once, then you'll see the list of files if they exist. You can go left and right to go through that list. And once you find the one that you want, you hit enter, and then the update process will begin. All right, so when the game updates, it makes a backup of the current code. So if the new code doesn't boot for some reason, and then you restart the game, it will revert to the backup. However, if you want to manually revert to the backup, you would execute this command here. Then you would restart the game, and then when it restarts, it'll take the backup code and put it into the main code directory. This is the error log. Revert time, traflow to shooter linear. So this is the stuff I came up with here. It gives you the date and the time, and then you can go through it. If there's a ton of errors, you can hit the enter key to jump from the beginning to the end. You can export those to USB. I just exported it to my computer here. You can clear the error log and the credit dot, like that. So all those settings I showed you earlier, like the pricing, the coils or whatever, you can export those. So let's say, oh, I've got my settings dialed in really well. In Jersey Jack, we're proud of things being dialed in. So make sure you got a USB stick in place. Hit that and boom, and what it'll do, this folder simulates the USB stick that would be in your game. So it will create a folder called TCM, which contains a folder called Game Settings. And those are the JSON settings of all the things you set up. So then if you put this in another game and import the settings, it's going to look for, on your USB stick, TCM game settings, and then it'll suck these in and put it onto the other game. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So like, let's say you had the game dialed in, you could do that export and like give it to your friend, and they could put it on their game. So yeah, it's just going to bring in the same settings it exported, so that's not going to change anything. Export switch reports to USB. So I haven't shown the switch reports, but this basically keeps track of all the switch edges. So you can see if there's like a discrepancy, like, oh, the switch opened 100 times, but only closed 80 times. Like there might be something up with it. This will create, this simulates the USB stick. This will create a CSV file, and you can just load it up and look at everything. Wow, cool, right? Reset high scores, that's obvious. Clear audits. Audits, so the audits is like how many games have been played, how many modes have been started, etc. You can clear that here. Clear switch reports clears the table that I just showed you. So then if I cleared it and re-exported it, everything would be 0. Internal timing data, you probably don't need to erase this. Internal timing data is like, oh, the ball went on the orbit, and how many milliseconds was between the left switch and the right switch, how many milliseconds between going into the right ramp and then the right in lane, how many milliseconds of going from the left ramp switch down to the left in lane or to the diverted ball. So the reason I keep track of that in the game is so I can determine the direction the ball is moving. So if it gets out of whack for some reason, you could reset this, but you don't really need to. This basically just creates a total count and then also creates an average, and that's loaded in at the beginning of every game. Reset default game settings. So that's all like the coil settings, the AV settings. So if you hit this, those will all be reset. But sometimes if something changes or is added, you might actually need to reset all and clean folders. So that will ensure that there aren't old settings. And this is mostly for like when we were prototyping stuff, but yeah, so if you do this, it will erase all those settings folders and then create new default files. So if something does get messed up or like, oh, I don't have the right range on the servo, then you can do this to reset it. But otherwise, when you update the game, you do not have to redo your settings. It will save them. So if let's say it adds a setting to the AV menu, it will actually append that to the AV menu JSON file. So you won't have to change the things that are already in AV settings. You'll just have to change the new thing that was added. And this exports the Unity log. So if there is a crash or something, or it's like, oh, some sort of crash happened and it creates a crash report, this exports those to USB so you can email those to Spooky Support or myself, and we can try to figure out what happened. Riveting menu action. So here's the audits menu. Let's see, obviously this thing's on free play. Number of games played. This is complete games played. So if you don't finish the game, these will not be updated. You see the total time played in hours, minutes, seconds, average time. Well, this is all pretty obvious, I would think. This has probably been reset a few times because these numbers are kind of low. But yeah, so if you want to adjust your game, it tells you how many times it drained down the left, the right, how many extra balls were lit if you want to make that stingier, how many times the extra ball was collected, replays, how many times the back down. See, the back down went down a bunch, so I had the replay too high. And how many times an award was given for high score. This is the same as the CSV, except for it's just drawn on the screen. Comma separated values. There, now you know what CSV stands for. Yeah, so there's the switch number, switch name, the edges, then it shows you the delta. So yeah, Trough 7 has some discrepancies. Well, yeah, that's probably because it's at the edge. It shows you the average and it shows you in the last game. And you can scroll through the whole list and be a data geek. You can sort it by rising low, rising high, falling low, falling high, average low, average high, and the delta. Oh, upper left flipper button has the most deltas. Interesting. Delta plus, delta minus, and delta Burke. Yeah. These people are dead, Delta Burke. This is used for production, but if you want to test everything, you can do this. So this would test everything. This would test only the coils. This would test only the servos. This would test, well, you can read. Then if you do this one, max only is coils and servos. Lights only are insert lights, RGB apron, and then the cabinet lights, such as the speaker and the topper. Or you can just have it go through all the individual lights. So if you want to look at all the individual lights on the speakers and just make sure that they're all lit, that's what Light Kit Serial does. And I think that brings us back around the horn. All right, well, that was a riveting video taking you through the menus of Spooky Pinball, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Pinball. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Wait, is this video really that enjoyable? It's kind of like a slideshow, but I don't know, I was thinking about it just a few hours ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, I could make a video where I explain all this stuff because it makes sense in my head, but a new owner would be like, I don't get it. So here you go. So share this video with friends if they're wondering how to set up the game. Well, I guess we'll see you on Pinside.